Good morning. The first item of business is general questions. Shortest question session of the week. At question number 1, I call Clare Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it has had with the banking industry about maintaining access to face-to-face banking services on high streets.
Minister Richard Lockhead.
Regulation of financial services is reserved. However, Scottish Government regularly engages with the sector and regulator through ministerial engagements such as the Financial Services Growth and Development Board. And Scottish Government officials attended an FCA-convened forum on access to cash on the 15th of October last year. That was an opportunity to raise Scottish-specific concerns directly with the FCA, Link and Cash Access UK, including Scotland's rural and remote geography and demographics and banking hub decisions, not taking into account the needs of individual communities. And of course, we continue to urge all financial services providers to listen to and address customer concerns.
Clare Haughey.
Yet another bank in my Rutherglen constituency is at the threat of closure, and under my count, 9 bank branches have closed in recent years, leaving Blantyre and Cambuslang as banking deserts. Many individuals, businesses, churches and organisations need access to cash banking, and online or digital banking does not suit everyone. And I'm also deeply concerned about the impact further bank closures have on our local high streets. Will the Minister join me in condemning the decimation of face-to-face banking across Scotland and join my calls for better access to banking facilities for all?
Minister.
The member raises an important issue, and I think all of us as constituency members have experienced the loss of high street bank branches and face-to-face transactions, and it is of course a matter of concern to the Scottish Government as well. I should say, of course, that the member may wish to ask Link to carry out an assessment to ensure there is consideration of banking hubs or access to cash points in our communities. And there are approximately 27 banking hubs in Scotland at the moment, with another 6 in progress through the Link scheme. And of course, we continue to make sure that takes into account Scotland's distinctive needs as well.
Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last month, the Bank of Scotland announced that it would close its branch in Kelso, and this is the 9th closure in the border since 2022. I agree with Richard Lockhead. We need to review the access to cash criteria, and the Scottish Conservatives will be pushing the UK Government to do that. However, does he think that we should now organise a roundtable with the high street banks, with Link, with Cash Access UK, so that we can bring this problem to this Parliament?
Minister.
Thank you. Such events have taken place before in the past, and indeed I have attended them myself, and I'm very happy for that to continue again at some point in the near future. Perhaps the new government and the new cohort of MSPs may wish to take that forward. But I think it's important that Scotland's voice is heard, and I can tell the member, I know she represents a largely rural constituency. I do as well, and indeed at one point my own constituency was the hardest hit in Scotland in terms of loss of banks, so I can identify with these concerns.
Question number 2, Ash Regan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it measures success in protecting care-experienced children in light of reports that its flagship policy, the Promise, has failed to keep vulnerable children safe.
Minister Natalie Donanis.
Protecting children from harm is a key priority for this Government. The Promise directs focus to fulfilling children's rights to be raised safely in their families. The rate of annual registrations to the Child Protection Register fell from 4.1 per 1,000 children in 2018-19 to 3 in 23-24, and rates of looked after children also declined over this period. That would suggest that agencies are putting safety plans in place earlier, before child protection plans become necessary. The Promise Progress Framework, published jointly with the Promise Scotland and COSLA, provides a national overview of indicators related to the Promise.
Ash Regan.
Safeguarding loses effectiveness when ideological confusion weakens practical protections across the public policy, and catastrophic consequences of diluting sex-based safeguards leave the vulnerable exposed to avoidable risks. And children in care are among Scotland's most vulnerable to exploitation. Yet children in care were sold a promise instead of a plan to protect them. And brave survivors and whistleblowers have been left pleading for decisive action to close these safeguarding gaps against talks of political legacy from those who walked away from an unkept promise. Leadership is judged by outcomes, not slogans, and promises, not protection. So can the failure to deliver on robust safeguarding and legal consequences for all those exploit vulnerable children frankly be judged as anything other than a failure?
Minister.
I don't agree with Ms Regan's assumption on this. I would say that protecting vulnerable children, as I've said, is an absolute top priority for the Government. We are taking action to protect vulnerable children, both through the promise and through non-legislative means as well. Obviously, the Children Care Experience and Service Planning Bill is currently making its way through Parliament, which I think will add extra protection for children and young people. On top of that, the Cabinet Secretary for Education announced last week will establish a statutory public inquiry into Scotland's response to group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation. I think that will speak directly to some of the asks that Ms Regan has brought to me today. What I would also say is that, as I said, the Children Care Experience and Service Planning Bill is currently making its way through Parliament. Ms Regan has not reached out to me to engage on any of these matters. She is more than welcome to do so.
Paul McLennan.
Thank you, President Officer. This SNP Government is delivering policies to support and improve access to opportunities for care-experienced young people. Can the Minister speak further on how the Scottish Government investment is continuing this vital work, for example, through the Care-Experienced Children and Young People Fund?
Minister.
Absolutely. We continue to invest across the board to support improved outcomes for care-experienced children and young people, including over £80 million from the Care-Experienced Children and Young People Fund, an increase in further education that has seen the number accessing the Care-Experienced bursary more than doubled since 2019-20, and from April 2026, care leavers will receive a new £2,000 care leavers payment, helping young people to begin adulthood with much greater security. And of course, all of this is on top of the Children Care Experience Service Planning Scotland Bill, which will soon have its Stage 3 proceedings in Parliament.
Question number 3, Tim Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what additional support it will provide to local authorities to address ageing infrastructure, including bridges.
Cabinet Secretary Shona Robertson.
Local authorities have a duty under the Roads Scotland Act 1984 to manage and maintain local roads and associated infrastructure in their area, and duties under the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 to secure the convenient and safe movement of traffic. The vast majority of funding available to councils is provided by means of a block grant from the Scottish Government. It's then the responsibility of individual local authorities to manage their own budgets and to allocate the total financial resources available to them, including on maintenance of local roads and bridges, on the basis of local needs and priorities, having first fulfilled their statutory obligations and the jointly agreed set of national and local priorities.
Tim Eagle.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed, Presiding Officer, just to be passing the buck back to councils that simply don't have the capital budgets to do it. My constituents don't want to hear about who did and didn't support the budget or what council budgets are not. What they care about is that bridges are crumbling around them. So we need to see outside the bubble of Holyrood and into the reality of what's happening in our areas. Clodagh Bridge has been closed now for over 4 years. Spey Viaduct, a very popular active travel route, is still sitting in the water. And now in Murray, Arthur's Bridge, a pivotal bridge for Lossiemouth, is declining fast. Yet councils across Scotland, including Murray, simply don't have the budgets to fix them. I ask now that the Cabinet Secretary give immediate and urgent consideration to reopening the local bridge maintenance fund to ensure communities in Murray and across Scotland can repair and replace critical infrastructure. Will she do this?
Cabinet Secretary.
At no point did the Tories, and certainly at no point did Craig Haughey, on behalf of the Tories, bring to me a proposition for a local bridge maintenance fund as part of the budget negotiations. And if Tim Eagle believes that was so important, perhaps he should have had a word with his front bench in order to make that a condition of support for the budget. That's how you get things done in this place, not by the posturing of Tim Eagle and others.
Question number 4, Jamie Halcro-Johnston.
To ask the Scottish Government what steps it's taking to ensure that Highlands and Islands Airports Limited airports are as accessible as possible to all residents and users.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
The Scottish Government will make a budget available to Highlands and Islands Airports Limited of up to £52.3 million in 2026-27 in order to ensure that HIAL can continue to operate safe and regulatory compliant airports. This includes ensuring that HIAL's airports are accessible and compliant with all relevant equalities legislation. HIAL have a number of initiatives aimed at improving accessibility, including accessibility guides for its airports provided and produced by Accessable in the civil Aviation Authority's Airport Accessibility Performance Report for 24-25. Inverness Airport, the only Hyle airport to be assessed, was rated as good. Presiding Officer, yesterday marked the 40th anniversary of the date that Hyle was officially formed, when it was incorporated by the UK Civil Aviation Authority. I would like to thank everyone who is now working for or has worked at Hyle over the past 4 decades for their commitment to providing excellent service to passengers and the role they have played in supporting air connectivity for our rural and island communities.
Johnston.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Should be aware of the unique challenges of the Highlands and Islands and some of the challenges of customers of accessing hub airports with limited public transport and other options available, and the long journeys they often have to make to do so. I was contacted by constituents who, using Inverness Airport and travelling sometimes hours to do so, are offered only a 15-minute free drop-off and pick-up window to collect family and friends, with the risk of incurring significant charges starting at over £10 for under an hour if they are longer, even if the flight they're meeting is delayed and sometimes cancelled before they've left. I've raised this issue with Hyle, who seem indifferent to my constituents' concerns. So will the Cabinet Secretary raise it with the government-owned Hyle and ensure that my constituents are not penalised for matters out with their control?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the member raises an important point. I think the integration of transport is really important. I'm sure he's welcoming the £2 bus fare cap pilot that's been introduced that will certainly address some of the cost challenges. But I think the timing issues and the time available at airports is best dealt with in an operational manner by the airport themselves. Clearly, as part of their responsibilities, they'll want to increase commercial revenue and reduce costs. However, and this is where I think I would agree with the member, it has to be balanced and recognise the different types of customers that they have, perhaps different to other airports. So it's something that I'll make sure my officials do raise with Hyle, and they will have been paying attention to this question.
Question number 5, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it's taking to encourage the uptake of electric vehicles in rural and island communities.
Cabinet Secretary.
Our £30 million EV infrastructure fund enables local authorities to work collaboratively and with the private sector to invest in public EV charging, targeting public funding in areas less likely to attract standalone private investment, including rural and island communities. In August, I announced over £3 million from the EV infrastructure fund for a collaborative project led by Hightrans, including Orkney, Shetland, Western Isles and Argyll and Bute councils, and a further £4.5 million for additional EV charging in rural and island areas across Scotland, which is fully allocated to 138 projects, delivering 266 additional charge points. The Rural and Island Infrastructure Fund will continue into 2026-27, and it is provided for within our 2026-27 Scottish budget.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response and also welcome the funding she's outlined. I mean, she'll be aware that Orkney has one of the highest take-ups of electric vehicles anywhere in Scotland. Recently, though, I was made aware that some insurance providers are starting to refuse island customers coverage due to what they say is a lack of local capacity for repair and maintenance of EVs. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to engage with HIE, with Orkney Islands Council, Orkney Renewable Energy Forum and other local stakeholders to see what can be done to address the capacity issues over the medium to longer term?
Cabinet Secretary.
That's a very important point, and I will certainly ensure my officials take up that issue, particularly in relation to insurance companies. But the more substantive point about making sure we've got a pipeline of skills available, we already fund and have funded colleges to deliver maintenance and repair, and obviously the kind of particular issues that EVs require as part of that transition, and certainly High should be able to be part of that continuing support.
Question number 6, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what actions Caledonian Maritime Asset Limited will take to improve the resilience of Ardrossan Harbour once it has been acquired.
Cabinet Secretary.
As outlined in my statement to Parliament on the 3rd of March and at the subsequent Ardrossan Task Force meeting held on the same day, CMAL, as new statutory harbour authority, are expected to take forward immediate works at the harbour to improve resilience. To ensure the continuation of the two-port operation, CMAL has identified immediate minor works and have therefore already procured replacement fenders and will repair navigation lights. These initial works will be undertaken as soon as possible and are planned to not disrupt continuing services, thus ensuring improved resilience of the Arran berth.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary again for returning Ardrossan Harbour to the public sector for that very positive response. Can she confirm that not only is CMAL primed to boost resilience immediately take control of the site, but that plans to do the full redevelopment of this vital airship port are well advanced, with regeneration and renewal ensuring a first-class, 21st century, fully functioning port to serve the communities of Ardrossan and Arran for 60 years or more.
Cabinet Secretary.
It is acknowledged that the purchase of Johnston is a significant milestone. However, momentum on the project is needed. CMA will review the original detailed design proposals and scope of works, such as the Arran Berth realignment. An indicative timeline for design and procurement works is being drafted. Current estimates could see works beginning June 2027. However, this is subject to procurement stage, approval of funding and contractor award and mobilisation.
Brief supplementary, Katie Clark.
I understand the Save Ardrossan Harbour campaign have been involved in discussions with the Cabinet Secretary about support for businesses over the last few years, and they tell me that the Cabinet Secretary said this was something that could be looked at when the harbour closes for redevelopment. Can the Cabinet Secretary ensure that campaign groups such as Save Ardrossan Harbour and Arran for Ardrossan Harbour are at the forefront of decisions that are taking place, and can she outline when compensation discussions can take place?
Cabinet Secretary.
So in terms of the redevelopment, there will be a number of partners involved, not least the North Ayrshire Council, who co-chair the Ardrossan Task Force. And in our discussions the other evening, that was part of ensuring that the future meetings of that and the future aspects of development are more fully embraced by the local community, as well as the issues around the immediate investment in the harbour itself. I have indicated that I do think that when the harbour has to close for the major redevelopment that's required, obviously we need to improve that port. Everybody knows that. That's part of the purchase arrangement. We need to make sure that the businesses that will be affected at that time are supported, and I certainly think that that is something I've put on record. I've discussed with the task force, but obviously that will be up for future decision by a future government.
Question number 7, Maggie Chapman.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the forthcoming International Women's Day, what action it is taking to ensure that Scotland's economy provides women with equitable access to economic opportunity, including how it supports them to live free from poverty and financial inequality.
Deputy First Minister.
Women must have equitable access to economic opportunities, and in April 2025 the gender pay gap for all employees in Scotland was narrower than the UK gap, but we know that more needs to be done. A range of initiatives across government help women to enter and progress in work, such as the expansion of early learning and childcare, parental employability support, and since April 2020, 70% of parents supported through No One Left Behind were female. Obviously, employment law is reserved, but our Fair Work approach aims to address women's workplace inequalities by encouraging employers to tackle gender pay gaps.
Maggie Chapman.
I thank the Deputy First Minister for her response, but despite legislation and decades of campaigning for equality, women continue to face discrimination, violence, exclusion and poverty. Engender has called for investment in women and a transformation of our communities. Specifically, they've developed 10 realistic steps to improve the lives of women, covering support for women with no recourse to public funds, social security asks and ensuring our economic strategies work for women. Can the DFM outline the Scottish Government's response to these and how she would work to implement them to ensure that all future economic and social policy considerations contribute to Scotland becoming a global leader on gender equality?
Deputy First Minister.
Those very helpful recommendations, of course, we also have the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, alongside a number of other plans to support the objectives that Maggie Chapman has just outlined, with responsibility particularly for our approach to the economy. I am proud of the efforts that are being made and the investment that's being made in terms of supporting women to either remain in work or to access employment. And I mentioned our No One Left Behind approach. We're delivering a person-centred, all-age employability offer in every local authority area, and women make up just under 50% of all participants. So there are intersectional barriers to employment that female parents can face in particular, and we need to continue to tackle those.
Brief question 8, Brian Whittle.
Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that the gap between secondary school leavers from the most deprived and least deprived areas going to a positive destination widened to 4.7 percentage points, which is the largest since 2021.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
Last week's data publication showed that the percentage of school leavers in a positive destination 3 months after the end of the school year was 95.7%, the second highest figure on record. Our most recent SQA exam results show that the pass rate for National 5 and Hires is up when compared to both 24 and the pre-pandemic results of 2019. The attainment gap has narrowed for National 5, Higher and Advanced Higher compared to last year, and the 24-25 Achievement of Curriculum for Excellence levels published in December demonstrate record levels of literacy and numeracy are being achieved in Scotland's primary schools. This welcome progress demonstrates that this government's approach to education is delivering results for Scotland's young people.
Brian Whittle.
Presiding Officer, can I first take a moment to welcome Scottish Apprenticeship Week and the vital opportunities it creates. However, Scotland is currently missing out on 5,000 high-quality nuclear jobs because the government refuses to back new projects or include nuclear in its energy skills passport. Furthermore, funding gaps are forcing colleges to turn away qualified students, including 71 qualified social care applicants and 400 engineer apprenticeships at Ayrshire College alone. Does the government accept that its policy choices are actively disadvantaging our school leavers by restricting their opportunities?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Mr Whittle for his question and for his warm welcome for Scottish Apprenticeship Week. I'm sure, like me, he was out visiting a local business this week in his own area, supporting the important work of apprenticeships in our communities. And of course, the government's budget, which Mr Whittle was not able to vote for, provided extra funding for more apprenticeships, but it also provided extra funding for Scotland's colleges, which has been welcomed by the sector. And I'm sorely concerned that Mr Whittle was not able to vote for that budget, and I hope he will be able to reflect on that and the positivity that this extra investment in communities like his has brought to Apprenticeship Week.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. I call Russell Finlay at question number 1.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. John Swinney personally backed Sally Donald to become a new SNP member of the Scottish Parliament. At her glitzy campaign fundraiser, he gushed about her in glowing terms. Mr Swinney was at the top table, smiling. He was by her side. Now that was just 12 days ago. Yesterday, Sally Donald was forced to quit as the SNP candidate for Edinburgh Southern. So when exactly did John Swinney know that his star candidate was under investigation for benefits fraud?
First Minister.
President, I am going to do my level best to answer the questions that Russell Finlay has put to me, as I always do, but I'm also not going to talk about individual cases because it is important that I respect the proper process that the Government has put in place to ensure that issues in relation to social security payments and potential fraud are dealt with properly. In relation to the specific question that Russell Finlay raises to me, I first became aware of these issues when the Government received a press inquiry about the subject in recent days.
Russell Finlay.
Thank you. John Swinney's star candidate used a crowdfunder to raise over £1,200 for her campaign. I mean, anyone
we're going to hear Mr Finlay. We're going to hear Mr Finlay just now.
Anyone who's daft enough to trust their cash to the SNP needs to give their heads a wobble. But, Presiding Officer, I'm more interested in taxpayers' money, because this case illustrates so much that's wrong with the SNP's benefit system. Thanks to the Scotsman newspaper, we know that Sally Donald may have claimed tens of thousands of pounds in ADP to which she was not entitled. I've repeatedly challenged John Swinney over the SNP's deliberate light-touch benefit system being wide open to abuse. But he is in denial. He told me, and I quote, "If there's evidence of fraud, these issues are already addressed by the systems that Social Security Scotland has in place." Does he stand by his claim that the system is strong enough to catch benefits cheats?
First Minister.
Yes, I stand by those comments because I believe that to be the case. And I can't be the only person that is surprised that Russell Finlay has not managed to make a connection between the fact that an investigation is being made which confirms the point that such activities are undertaken by Social Security Scotland, and the system is robust in that respect. So I think by his own words, not for the first time. Russell Finlay destroys the arguments he puts to me in Parliament today.
Russell Finlay.
Well, here's a reality check for John Swinney.
Yeah.
Last year, my party revealed that Social Security Scotland had referred just 29 cases of potential fraud to the Crown Office. And on the basis of fraud across the United Kingdom, that number should be in the thousands. And today we can reveal another shocking fact. Under the SNP's new benefits system, just three people have been convicted for fraud-related offences since 2022. Out of almost 1 million people claiming benefits in Scotland, just 3 people. Unbelievable. And on the basis of our evidence, does John Swinney agree that the SNP has effectively decriminalised benefit fraud in Scotland?
First Minister.
President Officer, I reiterate what I've said in my answer to Mr Finlay's second question, that the system is working because investigations take place where they are required and there is a robust assessment process in place. What, of course, this is cover for Mr Finlay is his desire to take benefits away from vulnerable people in our society. It's the fault line that's in the system that's here. That Russell Finlay and the Tories, with the restoration of the proper credentials of the nasty party of Scottish politics, are going after vulnerable people in our society. Well, my party's not going to do that.
Russell Finlay.
I remember the old John Swinney who preached about being respectful in here. Well, the mask has again slipped back to the angry old John Swinney who resorts to silly smears. He still doesn't get it.
Let us hear one another.
He still doesn't get it. The party of gravy bus grifters and camper van capers. They mug their own members. They rob the taxpayers of Scotland. They've built a benefit system that shouts free money here. Yeah. It is a charter for chancers. Yeah. Every other party backs the SNP's out-of-control benefit spending. But the Scottish Conservatives will keep telling the truth. It's unaffordable, it's unfair and it's unsustainable. We've set out a sensible plan to tackle fraud and to reduce the £7 billion and rising benefits bill. Mr Swinney can posture all he wants, but surely he can now see that the benefit system is completely and utterly broken.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I'm always respectful in my engagement in Parliament. I just will not apologise for setting out some hard truths to the Tory party. And of course, I didn't conjure up the description of the Tory party as the nasty party. That was conjured up and stated openly by Theresa May, the former Conservative Prime Minister, who in a moment of self-reflection told the Conservatives what they need to hear. And of course, there's been a resumption of the nasty party under the leadership of Russell Finlay. Now, just one illustration of the characteristics of Mr Finlay's plan demonstrates that if his plan was implemented, there would be the restoration of the two-child limit on the Scottish Child Payment. And what that would do is consign more families and more children to poverty in this country. And one of my objectives as First Minister is to make sure we succeed in eradicating child poverty. We are already making significant progress where there is a reduction in child poverty in Scotland when it is rising in the rest of the United Kingdom. Next week, the Social Justice Secretary will set out to Parliament the next steps in tackling child poverty, and this government is going to succeed in its determination to eradicate child poverty and consign the Tory party to electoral history in Scotland.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week in this chamber, John Swinney shamefully turned his back on families impacted by the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital scandal. Later today, he will finally meet them on an online team call. I hope he will take the opportunity to apologise to them. Last week, he said he couldn't set up an independent expert panel to answer families' questions because there was a public inquiry. not for the first time misleading this Parliament and hiding behind the inquiry when it suits him. He knows the inquiry is not looking at individual cases and therefore will not give those families the answers they deserve. In NHS Tayside, there is a public inquiry into the El Jamel scandal, alongside an expert panel looking at individual cases. So what he said last week is just not true. So will he now accept he was wrong and commit to that independent expert panel?
First Minister.
The first thing I want to say to Mr Sarwar is that there was no disrespect offered by me to families last week. I was simply sitting in my chair looking at Mr Sarwar answering his questions, and that's my duty to answer questions, and I did that, and I simply say to Mr Sarwar, I have got to give that matter my attention when I'm answering questions in Parliament. The second question that Mr Sarwar puts to me is about any scrutiny of individual cases. And Mr Sarwar, from my recollection of what he said to me, misrepresents what I said to Parliament last week. Not, of course, for the first time. What I said to Mr Sarwar last week is I would have to consider the question of looking at individual cases. I did not at any stage rule it out. So Mr Sarwar, once again, has misrepresented me in this chamber, and it's up to me to correct him for that purpose. Now, in 2020, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport commissioned a case note review which was undertaken by a panel of independent experts. So some of this work has already been undertaken. The review was led by Professor Michael Stevens and looked at 118 episodes of bacterial infection in 85 children who received treatment for blood disease, cancer or related conditions at the Royal Hospital for Children, and it published its findings in 2021. So that exercise has been done on a large number of cases. If there are more cases that are to be examined, then, as I said last week, I will consider that question. But I have to consider that mindful of the fact that there is now a public inquiry underway looking at all of these questions. But I reiterate to Mr Sarwar, at no stage last week did I rule out that possibility, and he should stop misrepresenting me in this chamber.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, to be frank, patients and families will see right through the nonsense of John Swinney, because they've heard it for 8 years. And this is not the only occasion John Swinney has misled this Parliament. He's done it for weeks in relation to safety issues at the hospital right now. Yet again, it has taken whistleblowers and journalists to reveal that infection risks to immunocompromised patients has led to 2 wards partially being closed. And he doesn't want to hear it from me, so perhaps he'll listen to the words of the grieving widow, Louise Lawrence. It beggars belief that as this incident was ongoing, the Health Board, the First Minister and the Health Secretary were publicly proclaiming the hospital was safe. As the leading expert states, 4B is not safe and nobody should be saying it is. Patients like Andrew remain at risk today simply because those responsible prioritise reputation over patient safety. Shame on each and every single one of you. Public safety and patient reassurance is urgent. It requires honesty and transparency. This Parliament voted 3 weeks ago for all these documents to be published, and they have not been. So will he stop hiding behind process and do it right now?
First Minister.
Well, let me address the issues that Mr Sarwar puts to me. The first thing is to say that last week I met with some of the families involved in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, and this afternoon I will meet with many more as part of that conversation, and they will have my attention and my engagement on all of these issues. Now, Mr Sarwar asked me for transparency on these issues, and I want to be crystal clear with Parliament. The Government received an Amber Hayat alert on Thursday, the 26th of February, last Thursday, regarding Ward 4B at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. The ward cares for bone marrow transplant patients. This morning, the Government was advised that that Hayat alert was upgraded to red. Now, the issue that has made the difference between the Amber alert and the red alert is there's only one factor of difference, and that is the upgrading of one aspect of the Hyatt assessment tool, which is to acknowledge the heightened public anxiety around this matter. It is not due to any increased risk of harm to patients. So it's important that I put that on the record, that fundamentally the clinical consensus is that the wards in question are safe, and I reiterate that, that view, that I consider the hospital and its component parts to be safe, because where there are issues identified, openly and transparently, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde are addressing those issues, and they will be required by the government to do exactly that. And that's exactly what the Health Secretary has been engaging with the Health Board about, and that's what I expect them to undertake in the period to come.
Anna Sarwar.
In that answer, John Swinney reveals the inconsistency at the heart of this government. 14 amber and red warnings were received by the government before March 2018, and they still took no action and denied there were infection risks at the hospital. He now admits that amber and red warnings come to the government. So why were they ignored before 2018 and people died as a result? Every step of the way, this SNP government has attempted to misinform, deflect and deny. Progress has only ever been made when they've been backed into a corner, and even now they hide behind process rather than just tell the truth. So let's look at what's been established over the last few weeks. We now know political pressure was applied to open a hospital before it was ready and safe, and people died as a result. I would suggest to Shona Robertson, she was the Health Secretary, she should perhaps reflect on her own decisions and what happened. We know repeated warnings of infections were ignored. We know staff were bullied and attempts made to silence them. We know grieving families were offered bribes in exchange for their silence. And we know, despite all of this, even now the truth is denied and the hospital has not been validated. Families don't trust him, and he won't release the papers this Parliament has demanded that he must. So why is John Swinney incapable of doing the right thing by these families when it comes to this hospital?
First Minister.
I completely reject that charge. Completely and utterly reject that charge. And in relation to grieving families, I will meet grieving families this afternoon, as I indicated I would do, just as I met families last week, just as I have met my constituency capacities, victims of the LGML situation, and I met them as First Minister on Monday. In relation to the question of releasing papers, my understanding is that the papers that were considered by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board have been made publicly available, which addresses the issue Mr Sarwar is putting to me. If there are any documents that he believes have not been released that the government committed to doing so, he should advise me as to what those documents are, because my understanding is that those documents have been put in the public domain. We've established an oversight group which involves representatives of families, chaired by the Chief Executive of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and also by Sir Lewis Ritchie, an eminent clinician, to make sure there is external interrogation of the issues from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And on the question of openness, I have just put on the record today the most recent information that is available to me. I could not be any more open with Parliament on this question based on the information that I have available to me. So, and also let me add that the government has established a public inquiry that will consider all of these issues, and we await the findings of Lord Brodie. So what I would say to Anna Sarwar at this particular moment is the government recognises the concern, the deep concern of families. That is being addressed by the steps that we're taking, and that will continue to reflect the position of my government.
Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. Flight data shows that in the week leading up to the US and Israeli attack on Iran, 24 US military aircraft landed at Prestwick Airport, some of which came directly from Israel. That's a significant increase in American military activity at an airport owned by the Scottish Government. We now know this was in preparation for their bombing campaign against Iran. Trump and Netanyahu are not liberating the Iranian people from their brutal regime by murdering their children, as they did when they killed dozens of little girls in a Tehran school shortly after they arrived for school on Saturday. The Israeli military is rightly banned from using Prestwick Airport because of their genocidal assault on Palestine. The First Minister said that America and Israel's attack on Iran is not compatible with the international rules-based system. In other words, it is illegal under international law. So surely he will now ban the American military from using Prestwick Airport.
First Minister.
President Officer, let me reiterate what I've said publicly on this issue, that I cannot see how the intervention by the United States and Israel is compatible with an international rules-based system. And the implications of this are now being felt very directly by our own citizens, many of whom are stranded in the Middle East. And the position that the Prime Minister finds himself in of having to address the security implications for our citizens as a consequence of the American and Israeli action demonstrates how these issues can escalate out of control very, very quickly indeed and pose direct risks to our citizens. So I am concerned for the well-being of Scottish citizens who are trapped in the Middle East, and we are working with the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office to try to seek the repatriation of those individuals as quickly as it is safe to do so, given the risks and the threats that are faced. Now, in relation to the question of the use of Prestwick Airport, the Government is in the process of establishing clarity around the use by the American Air Force of Prestwick Airport. That is a process of inquiry that is underway, and obviously when the Government has more to say on that question, we will share that with Parliament.
Ross Greer.
The First Minister is right that America's attack on Iran is incompatible with international law. But he's now seeking an answer that we already have about US use of Prestwick Airport. We can see the flight data. We see the flights between Prestwick Airport and Israel by the US military. It's abundantly obvious what they're doing. Spain, a fellow NATO member, has now banned the US military from using their air bases. Their Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, said you can be against a hateful regime and at the same time against an unjustified and dangerous military intervention that is outside of international law. I believe the First Minister agrees with that statement. It's very similar to statements he made when he marched against the war against Iraq in 2003. The US is using an airport owned by the Scottish Government to wage an illegal war, killing hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent people. But at the moment, Scotland's First Minister is sitting on his hands. This Government says it stands up for Scotland. Why does that stop the moment it might involve Donald Trump? Why won't the First Minister kick Trump's troops out of Prestwick Airport immediately?
First Minister.
I think it's pretty clear from what I've said over the last few days that I am in no way, shape or form a supporter of what has happened in the course of the last few days. No way, shape or form, and no amount of the characterisation of my stance that Mr Greer has put on the record will demonstrate that to be the case. Now, I am taking the steps within Government to establish the detail around about the use of Prestwick Airport. When the Government has more to say to Parliament about that, we will do so. But let me reiterate that I believe the intervention by Israel and the United States is incompatible with the international rules-based system, and that has been the position of my Government and will continue to be so.
Question number 4, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the UK Government's Spring Statement.
First Minister.
President Officer, the UK Spring Statement provided an update on the various issues in relation to the economic situation. We had hoped there would be a clear outcome from the Spring Statement in relation to the Energy Profits Levy, with an immediate end to that profits levy, given the damage that has been done to the North Sea sector as a consequence. We received additional consequential information from the United Kingdom Government, which will be spread over a 3-year period, beginning with 26-27, which represents additional funding of less than half of 1% of the budget over a 3-year period.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. UK economic growth forecasts have been revised downwards to lower than in the last year of the Tories. Does the First Minister agree that the Spring Statement was a missed opportunity to abolish an energy profits levy that's costing 1,000 jobs each month in the North Sea at a time of fuel insecurity, remove increased employers' national insurance contributions, which have hit the low-paid businesses and cost 200,000 jobs, and finally deliver justice to 3.6 million WASPy women betrayed by the UK Labour Government? And does he agree it's no wonder that, bereft of any vision for Scotland, the best election slogan Labour can contrive is "Hold your nose and vote Labour"?
On devolved competence, First Minister.
On the issues that are associated with the Spring Statement, I am still unable to understand how the UK Government can reconcile their supposed enthusiasm for growth within the economy with the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, which is so obviously damaging employment growth within many parts of the United Kingdom. But thankfully, because of the steps of my government, unemployment is at a very low level compared to the rest of the United Kingdom. I would have wanted the Chancellor's statement to address the energy profits levy that's costing 1,000 jobs each month in the North Sea at a time of fuel insecurity. So the challenges that we face in Scotland have not been assisted by the stance taken by the United Kingdom Government in the Spring Statement, but we will work to ensure that at all times we continue to protect and promote the interests of the people of Scotland. And Mr Gibson's characterisation of the dynamic election campaign of the Labour Party, which has gone from voting for Labour for change to holding your nose to vote Labour, just tells us what we all knew a long time ago. It stinks to vote Labour.
Question number 6. Stephen Kerr.
To ask the First Minister, in light of the recently published Commission on School Reform Manifesto warning that the Curriculum for Excellence has been poorly implemented and is harming long-term prospects, what the Scottish Government's position is on whether a lack of clear, nationally specified curriculum content and standards has contributed to declining attainment and inconsistency across Scotland's schools.
First Minister.
President Officer, Scottish education continues to perform well, with record levels of literacy and numeracy, a record low in the poverty-related attainment gap in primary schools, and a near record number of young people entering positive destinations. The Government has sought, at the encouragement of the Commission on School Reform, an assessment of Curriculum for Excellence from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. That review indicated that Curriculum for Excellence was the correct approach. Work to update the curriculum, ensuring strong alignment between the broad general education and the senior phase, is underway, and I take the view that these reforms are essential to ensure the continued success of our education system.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, it's the usual self-congratulation from John Swinney. He can't have read the OECD review of 2021 if that's what he thinks the sum content of that review was. Teachers have been warning for years that the Curriculum for Excellence is no longer fit for purpose. It's weakened the emphasis on subject knowledge, created inconsistency between schools, and has coincided with Scotland falling behind international competitors. The OECD review in 2021, 5 years ago, warned that there was an insufficient clarity about what pupils should learn, how standards should be measured, yet all these years on, the SNP government have done nothing. Will the First Minister now accept that his government bears responsibility for the erosion of Scotland's once world-leading education system and set out what action must now be taken to restore clear standards, strong knowledge foundations and consistent expectations across Scotland's schools?
First Minister.
I don't accept that characterisation of Scottish education. Attainment levels are a record high in literacy and numeracy as a consequence of the commitment this Government has given to the Scottish Attainment Challenge. The poverty-related attainment gap across both primary and secondary in literacy and numeracy are at record lows. We are seeing in the delivery of Scottish education improved examination results, which were demonstrated by the exam results in August of 2025, showing the strength of Scottish education. And in terms of the action the Government has taken action to address the issues from the OECD in relation to curriculum content, and any curriculum has got to be founded. And if Mr Kerr doesn't realise that the curriculum is a knowledge-based curriculum that equips young people with the skills for the 21st century, then he's not been paying attention to the contents of Scottish education. And when I'm engaged with Scottish education, the length and breadth of the country, I see a strong education system with outstanding young people, with a record number of achievements being made in our schools, and I'm proud of the strength of Scottish education.
Question number 6, Katie Clark.
To ask the First Minister, in light of the theme of this year's International Women's Day being equal rights and equal justice, what action the Scottish Government is taking to improve the legal rights of women and girls.
First Minister.
So the Scottish Government is strengthening the rights of women and girls. I'm committed to ensuring people are protected from abuse, which is why we are introducing new protections for women and girls via the hate crime legislation, and are consulting on other new protections, such as the banning the creation of deepfake images. Significant reforms have also recently been introduced, for example, the establishment of a sexual offences court, providing victims of sexual offences with an automatic lifelong right of anonymity, and providing women with the ability to seek protection from abuse by removing the abuser from their home.
Katie Clark.
A number of women members have raised with the First Minister the financial problems being raised by rape crisis centres, who provide a range of practical and legal services to women. The 3 rape crisis centres, including the Star Centre, which provides services in Ayrshire, have spoken about significant real terms cuts, and Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis have closed 2 of its waiting lists. The First Minister has said that there are active discussions with ministers. As we approach International Women's Day, will the First Minister give a commitment that there will be no cuts so that services provided by rape crisis centres can continue?
First Minister.
Well, I want to reassure Katie Clark that the Government wants to put in place appropriate funding for rape crisis centres around the country. We are providing a 5% uplift to the Delivering Equally Safe Fund, bringing the total investment in the fund to almost £46 million over 26 to 28. Now, Katie Clark also raised with me the issues in relation to Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis Centre, and improvements to the funding position have been put in place there, as they also have been put in place in relation to the Star Centre in Ayrshire, which she raised with me. So I hope that provides the reassurance that the Government wishes to adequately and effectively fund the network of rape crisis centres around the country.
Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's scandalous that the SNP government has spent millions of funding the same self-ID groups while shutting sex-based women's organisations out of public funding. Ahead of International Women's Day, will the First Minister commit to finally opening the Equally Safe and Equality and Human Rights funds to fair and open competition?
First Minister.
The Government sets out to Parliament the investment that we're making. I've set out the uplift to the funds, and of course all of that provision is put to Parliament in the annual budget process, which I'm pleased to say last week Parliament approved.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries. I call Jackie Dunbar.
Industry experts have warned that global uncertainty could lead to increased fuel prices. With that in mind, the Labour Party must rethink their planned hikes to fuel duty, which will hit hard-working families in Scotland hard. Does the First Minister believe, when Scotland produces far more oil and gas than we can hope to use, energy-rich Scots should not need to pay through the nose to fill their cars?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there is obviously renewed uncertainty about the energy prices that we will all pay because of the events in the Middle East, and that is going to cause significant disruption and anxiety within the economy. Therefore, it is essential that all of us are mindful of the steps that we take to ensure that these issues are properly addressed, and that onus and responsibility is fundamentally on the United Kingdom Government in relation to these areas of taxation. Where we have responsibility, yesterday I was in Inverness announcing the commencement of the £2 bus fare cap proposal, which will be deployed in the Highlands on the 23rd of March. It's already operating in the Western Isles and in Shetland. It will start in Orkney on Monday. It's another example of this government intervening to support individuals to reduce the cost of living, and I'm pleased with the interventions that we're making.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been contacted by local church groups who have raised concern about the closure at the end of this month of the UK Government's Listed Places of Worship grant scheme, a very valuable scheme I'm sure the First Minister is aware of, that allows places of worship to recover value-added tax on repair and renovation costs. Now, the UK Government has indicated that from April a replacement scheme worth £92 million will be established, which will cover England only. That will, of course, generate Barnett consequentials for the Scottish Government. So, will the First Minister commit to using those Barnett consequentials to establish a similar scheme for listed places of worship here in Scotland?
First Minister.
I'll have to look at the detail of the timing of those announcements, but I suspect the Barnett consequentials that Mr Fraser talks about will have been in the budget settlement that the Parliament determined on in the budget debate last week, in which, of course, Mr Fraser didn't support the Government's budget. So we will look at this issue and see what we can do to assist, and obviously if there are further steps the Government can take, we'll share those with Parliament.
Pauline McNeill. The First Minister is aware that there are temporary works on the M8 viaduct and it's already 4 years over schedule, but I want to put on record to thank Amy and Transport Scotland for the site visit that I had. But Transport Scotland are now consulting on 3 options for a permanent solution, and one of them is to demolish the M8, that section of the M8, and divert it to the M74 with a cost of up to £125 million. So I want to ask the First Minister, does he agree that this option would be a disaster considering the impact on the M74 and the West of Scotland economy, because it's much wider than Glasgow, obviously? And does he agree that Transport Scotland should remove this option and they should reassure businesses, taxis, drivers and buses that this option will not be taken seriously?
First Minister.
I obviously understand the concern that Pauline McNeill raises with me. This is an issue that is the subject of active consultation, and obviously Transport Scotland will consider the feedback that comes, and if there are the concerns that Pauline McNeill has set out, I'm sure we'll hear in the consultation process, and I give her the commitment that the Government will consider very carefully the views that are expressed by all interested parties about this issue.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Labour Party betrayed workers, industry and their economy when they failed to scrap their tax on Scotland's energy at the Spring Statement this week. Not only does that destroy jobs, it ruins investment in renewables and puts our energy security at risk at a time of escalating global conflict. Does the First Minister share my view that Labour's tax on Scotland's energy must end now, to put us in a position to boost our economy, save jobs and ensure our energy security?
First Minister.
I'm not quite sure why the Labour Party are taking such exception to Mr Stewart's question today. It rather reinforces the lack of concern they have for the employment of people in the North Sea oil and gas sector at the present moment. Now, I have been raising with the Prime Minister for some months now the necessity of removing the energy profits levy, because what we are seeing because of that levy is an accelerated decline in oil and gas without the upsurge in renewables activity that we need to see that being compensated. So there is a significant employment threat faced by people in the North Sea oil and gas sector, and the Labour Party is absolutely oblivious to all of that. They don't don't care about it one jot. Well, this government does care about the employment of individuals in Scotland. I reiterate my call for the removal of the Energy Profits Levy, and it should happen the sooner the better.
Thank you. Let's make sure that we can hear one another. Those in the gallery would very much like to hear contributions. Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Councillors here in Edinburgh have voted to develop a framework for a congestion charge here in the capital. This could see residents in East Lothian, Mid Lothian and West Lothian having to pay over £4,000 a year to drive into the city. The First Minister says he's interested in cost of living, so can I ask him, does he agree with me that it is unfair for my constituents to pay to drive to work, visit family or go to hospital? And I know he is keen on referenda, so can I ask him, does he agree, like in 2005, this should be decided by a referendum of people across my region?
First Minister.
President Officer, there is a dilemma at the heart of the question that Miles Briggs raises, because on a very regular basis, members of Parliament will press the government to enable local authorities to take more comprehensive decisions about their localities. And here we have Mr Briggs, who I think probably over time has probably argued for me to enable local authorities to have more scope to do things, asking me to intervene and to stop that happening. So these are local matters that local authorities must consult about and decide about. It's their responsibility to do exactly that. What I would say to Mr Briggs on the subject of a referendum, I think the next referendum that needs to take place in Scotland is a referendum on Scottish independence, and again, the sooner the better.
Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It feels like a good time to remind the Chamber and Kevin Stewart in particular that the triple threat of climate breakdown, nature loss and pollution is an urgent danger to our people and environment. Can I thank the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Climate Action and Energy, Gillian Martin in particular, for their support for the Ecocide Scotland Bill, which was recently backed by 90 MSPs from 6 political parties at stage 1. While the Parliamentary Committee, by a majority of 1 vote, has stopped the clock on this bill for this session, the threat to Scotland's nature remains. So does the First Minister agree with me and the majority of people in Scotland that this bill must be a priority for the next session of Parliament so that Scotland can benefit from a stand-alone offence of ecocide to deter and protect us from the most severe environmental destruction?
First Minister.
So let me begin first of all by paying tribute to Monica Lennon for the work that she's done on this particular bill. I understand the committee decided not to proceed to stage 2 consideration, which obviously it's a matter for the committees, the decisions that they take. What I would say is that the issues that Monica Lennon raises about nature loss, biodiversity and climate change are sustained, important priority issues, and they cannot be avoided. So that's why the government is committed to the policy agenda we are committed to, which will obviously, should the government be re-elected, will involve consideration of the issues that Monica Lennon raises with me today. But I think we all have to recognise that there is now a much more divided debate on this question, and it's important that there is leadership deployed to make sure that we address the necessity for climate action and to restore nature loss, and that's what I'm committed to in the programme of my government.
Clare Haughey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I remind members of my register of interests. This week, new figures have shown a 6.1% increase in the number of NHS operations performed in the last year. Meanwhile, CAM's waiting times of over 18 weeks are now at their lowest level since June 2013, with CAM's targets having been met consistently for over a year. And that follows last week's news that waiting lists in Scotland are continuing to fall, with waits of over a year decreasing for 8 consecutive months. Does the First Minister expect continuous improvements to delivery across our National Health Service?
First Minister.
I do expect that to be the case, because the Government has committed itself to reducing long waits in our National Health Service, and we are now seeing, as my colleague Clare Haughey has said, 8 months of continuous reductions in long waits for outpatients and for patients with a treatment time guarantee. Now, the latest data this week shows that operation numbers are up 5.6% in the 12 months to December 2025. GP numbers are up. There are 16 walk-in GP centres being delivered across the country. I know the Labour Party absolutely loathe these GP walk-in centres, but I'm pleased they're going to provide more access to healthcare services in Scotland. The national performance against the 18-week CAM standard has been met for the last year. So I assure Clare Haughey, the government under my leadership is going to continue to deliver the improvements in the National Health Service. We're going to continue doing what we've already got in place.
Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding officer, this week Brewdog, based in Ellon in Aberdeenshire, announced the loss of 484 jobs and the closure of 38 pubs after the company fell into administration. 9 of these bars that have closed are in Scotland, including 2 in Aberdeen and 1 in Inverurie. Unions, workers and investors have all voiced anger at how the sale of the business was handled, with staff being told they'd lost their jobs during a 15-minute conference call. First Minister, Brewdog is the latest in a string of pubs to have closed in the North East so far this year, with its former chief executive pointing to business rates as a factor in the company's downfall. So can I ask, what is the Scottish Government doing to support staff who have now lost their jobs at Brewdog, and when will he finally put a stop to this SNP stealth tax on our hospitality sector?
First Minister.
I think, with the greatest respect to Mr Lumsden, I think the issues in relation to Brewdog's situation have got a great deal more to do with other factors than they do with business rates levied by the Scottish Government. But on the question of business rates, the Government has, of course, in the budget that was passed last week, which Mr Lumsden didn't support, we put in place support and reliefs totalling, if my memory serves me right, over £900 million in relation to business rates relief. We are also supporting transitional relief as part of that figure to assist businesses in the hospitality sector. The Government will, of course, engage closely with the employees. I'm deeply concerned about the way in which Brewdog employees have been treated. I think it's an appalling way for members of staff to be treated in this fashion, and the Partnership Action for Continuing Employment initiative that the Government puts in place to support any employees that lose their jobs will be available to help those from Brewdog that have lost their jobs.
Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I met with a constituent last Friday who was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2018. She's had successful treatment for a mastectomy, chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and she was assured she would receive breast reconstruction surgery following treatment, and that will likely involve multiple visits from Shetland to Aberdeen Breast Clinic, but she's thus far failed to establish when this will happen. It's evident the lengthy delay is impacting her own mental health and well-being, and consequently that of her family. Does the First Minister know if years of delay for breast reconstruction surgery is usual, and can he ask his Health Secretary to engage directly with me about this specific case in order to try and get some answers for my constituent who's already been through so much?
First Minister.
I'm very sympathetic to the point that Beatrice Wishart raises, and I have answered some questions on this topic before, and I will ask the Health Secretary to engage directly with Beatrice Wishart on this question. Obviously, the same theatres that are undertaking activity to essentially tackle the issues of breast cancer and other cancers would be the theatres used for breast reconstruction surgery. And the clinical priority has been attached where we have such backlogs in the aftermath of COVID to the immediate treatment of the life-threatening conditions that individuals face. That has sadly and regrettably, from my point of view, led to significant delays in breast reconstruction surgery. So that's the rationale for where we find ourselves, but I will ask the Health Secretary to engage directly with Beatrice Wishart to support her constituency, and I simply express my regret and apologies for the delay that has been experienced, but it's for those reasons and those reasons alone.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. Our next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Jeremy Balfour, and there will be a brief suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.